Have you ever wondered why some people seem to live surrounded by drama? As if they carry a magnet that attracts emotional vampires, manipulators, and all kinds of toxic people, while others walk through the same world, pass through the same streets, and coexist in the same environments, but remain almost invisible to this type of predator. Have you looked around, perhaps tired, exhausted from so much emotional wear, and thought, why does this always happen to me? Why do these people choose me as their target? If you are watching this video, it is very likely that you are tired of feeling drained, manipulated, or living at the mercy of the psychological games of people who seem to feed off your energy. Before we dive deeper, I'd love to hear from you. What kind of behavior drains your energy the most? Let's start a conversation in the comments below. Your story might help someone else spot the red flags earlier. Make sure you watch to the end, because I'll share a simple 3-minute daily mindset shift that will change how people treat you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Ready to stop attracting the wrong people and become unshakable? Let's begin. Perhaps you are someone who always tries to keep the peace, who gives too much of yourself, who avoids conflicts but ends up caught in the same vicious cycles of toxic relationships. And it may be that deep down, you have started to think that the problem lies solely with you. Because today, I want you to listen to me until the end, because what we are going to talk about here could turn a key inside you. Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, discovered something that most people don't even imagine. It's not just about luck, fate, or bad luck. There is a deep, almost invisible mechanism that determines who will be pursued by toxic people and who will go unnoticed by them. And no, it's not because these people are stronger, tougher, or know how to assert themselves by shouting and fighting. It's something much quieter, and precisely for that reason, much more powerful. Because toxic people are like emotional predators. They sniff out the emotional wounds that you still carry open within yourself. They are experts at detecting vulnerabilities, insecurities, fears that you often try to hide. And that is what makes you visible to them. The secret to becoming psychologically inaccessible is not in fighting against these people. It's not in shouting, cutting off relationships, or building giant walls around you. The real secret lies in something that Jung called integrating your shadow. Today, I want to speak directly to you who are tired of feeling drained, of carrying weight that isn't yours, of living on the defensive. I want to show you that there is a way out, but it's not what most people teach out there. It's not enough to learn catchy phrases, self-affirmation techniques, or create lists of boundaries. You need to do something much deeper. You need to know and embrace the darkest parts of yourself, those that you may be ashamed to admit exist. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And it is this understanding that changes everything. Because the moment you stop projecting your shadows onto others, toxic people simply stop seeing you as a target. It's as if you become invisible to them, not because you are hiding, but because you no longer have the emotional cracks through which they enter. Carl Jung, in all his genius, dedicated a good part of his life to studying the invisible mechanisms that govern the human psyche. One of his most powerful discoveries was that unconscious patterns, often rooted in early experiences and unresolved emotional issues, can manifest as destructive behaviors in ourselves and others, even if they seem socially acceptable or are not overtly aggressive. That said, toxic people do not appear out of nowhere, nor do they choose their victims at random. They have an almost animal instinct for sniffing out what is wounded within us, as it resonates with the shadow and complexes within it. They perceive without needing words where you are vulnerable, where you hide fear, shame, or unmet needs. If you constantly find yourself caught up in dramas, in manipulative situations, in relationships where it seems you always have to prove your worth or defend your sanity, know that this does not happen because there is something wrong with you. It happens because without realizing it, you are emitting subtle signals. signals that tell the world there is something in me that is still open, that still hurts. Jung called this projections. Everything you do not accept in yourself, everything you repress, transforms into a kind of energy that leaks into the world. Toxic people are like predators that smell this emotional blood. They approach those who are wounded because that is where they can exert power, control, and feed off the drama that consumes you from within. But Jung discovered something even more fascinating. When you integrate those aspects, you have been trying to hide your shadow. You create what he called psychic integrity. And psychic integrity is something almost palpable. It is like a vibrational frequency that repels those who are used to exploiting emotional gaps. Toxic people simply lose interest in those who do not react to their game, who do not show fear, who do not need approval or validation. People with psychic integrity do not live in war against others. They are not always armed, tense, waiting for the next attack. They live in a state of internal solidity. They know who they are. They know what they want. And most importantly, they know what they are not willing to tolerate. And this solidity is unconsciously perceived by those who feed off chaos. It is as if emotional predators begin to see these people as hard, smooth stones where there is no place to sink their claws. Jung said that the shadow is a living part of the personality. Denying it does not make it disappear. It only turns it into weakness. But when you integrate it, when you acknowledge it, it becomes strength. It starts to work in your favor, creating an energy field that repels those who seek to exploit your insecurities. Perhaps you are thinking, but how do I do this? How do I integrate something I don't even know exists? This is where the real work begins. Because psychic integrity is not something that is achieved with motivational phrases or by reading half a dozen self-help books. It is a deep, sometimes painful journey, but absolutely liberating. In the next section, I will guide you exactly into this territory. We will understand how to recognize the projections you make onto others and discover why what irritates or fascinates you most about toxic people is almost always a mirror of your own unhealed wounds. Are you ready to take this first step? Then let's move forward. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Now we arrive at a place where almost no one wants to go looking inward, because it is much easier to blame the world outside, to point fingers at toxic people, to say that they are narcissists, they are emotional vampires, they are manipulators. All of this may even be true, but if it were just that, it would be enough to cut contact with these people, and that would be it. We would be saved. But reality is not that simple. You may have noticed that even when changing environments, jobs, or even cities, the pattern often repeats itself. You leave an abusive relationship and fall into another similar one. You escape a controlling boss and end up finding another. You distance yourself from a manipulative friend, and suddenly, someone similar appears in your life. Why does this happen? Carl Jung offers us a brutal yet liberating answer. What irritates or attracts us intensely in others is often a reflection of what we deny or repress within ourselves. This is what he called projection. Projection is when you take parts of yourself, parts that you cannot stand to see or admit, and stick them onto the image of another. Suddenly, that toxic person represents everything you hate or everything you secretly desire, but are afraid to acknowledge. Think of someone who evokes anger, disgust, or even fascination in you. Ask yourself, what exactly bothers or attracts me so much about this person? Perhaps you hate their selfishness, authoritarianism, or manipulativeness. But if you look deeper, you may realize that there is a part of you that also wants to set boundaries, that also desires power, that also wants to be heard without having to ask for permission. Perhaps this part of you was repressed long ago in childhood when you were told that feeling anger was wrong, that wanting attention was ugly, that speaking your mind was dangerous. So you learned to bury those impulses, and every time you encounter someone who lives that shadow without guilt, an explosive reaction arises. Hatred, repulsion, or even an irresistible attraction. Jung said that only with the transformation of the individual's attitude will the psychology of the nation begin to transform. Many people assume that setting boundaries simply means learning to say no to others. But the deeper message is this: unless you turn inward and explore your unresolved wounds, you'll continue to emit signals of pain, insecurity, and fear. And unfortunately, toxic people are highly attuned to these signals. They are drawn to vulnerability. It's not easy to recognize the ways in which we project our inner wounds onto the world. It can be painful to accept that some of the dynamics that make us feel like victims are connected to parts of ourselves. Yet this moment of recognition is where true power begins. When you dare to ask, with complete honesty, "What is this person showing me about myself?" you begin to reclaim the energy you've been unconsciously giving away. Instead of using your strength to try to change others, you redirect it toward deeper self-awareness. This isn't about blaming yourself for someone else's toxic behavior. It's about understanding that while you can't control who crosses your path, you can control what you project into the world. And when you stop projecting unresolved pain, emotional predators lose interest. They no longer see a weak spot to exploit. But there's another crucial step. You must stop fueling toxic dynamics. Understanding your projections is only the beginning. If you continue engaging in emotional battles with toxic people, nothing will truly shift. And here's a tough truth. Sometimes, unknowingly, we are the ones feeding them exactly what they need. Not just attention, but emotional energy. Toxic individuals thrive on your fear, anger, insecurity, and resentment. Every emotional outburst, every desperate attempt to explain or justify yourself, every argument, all of it feeds them. It's a cycle. They provoke. You react. Whether it's a snide remark, silent treatment, or veiled accusation. They wait for you to take the bait. And once you do, once you lose your cool, the narrative flips. You become too emotional, irrational, or overreacting. And they walk away untouched, often playing the victim themselves. How often have you tried to reason with someone who clearly didn't want to understand? Presented facts, pleaded for clarity, and yet you left the conversation more confused and doubting yourself. This is no accident. Toxic people know how to distort your perception. If they can shake your emotional balance, they've already won half the battle. As Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. The more intensely you react, the more power you give to the very thing you want to overcome. And toxic people use this to their advantage. They learn your triggers and use them to trap you in patterns that feel impossible to escape. So what's the antidote? Neutrality. But don't mistake neutrality for weakness or silence for submission. True neutrality is an act of strength. When you respond to provocation with calm, with deliberate silence, or by refusing to engage, you strip the toxic person of their power. Without your emotional reaction, they have nothing to feed on. They lose interest, and eventually, they avoid you altogether, because your calm presence reminds them they hold no sway over you. Reaching this place takes discipline. You must learn to regulate your reactions, which is especially hard when old wounds are triggered. That's why beyond recognizing your projections and stepping away from the emotional tug-of-war, there's a third key to healing: developing internal boundaries. Boundaries aren't just external. They begin within. They shape what emotional experiences you allow, what you take personally, and how you protect yourself from manipulation. They are the inner shield that keeps emotional blackmail and subtle abuse at bay. And that's where we go next. Many people think that having boundaries means just learning to say no to others. But I will tell you a truth that no one shares. External boundaries are useless if you don't have internal boundaries. The true defense against toxic people starts within you. Toxic people do not only invade your schedule, your physical space, or your time. They primarily invade your mind. And they do this because they find open doors. These doors are your unresolved needs, The need to be accepted, the need to please, the need to prove you are right, the need to avoid conflict at all costs, the need to be seen as a good person. As long as these needs are screaming inside you, anyone can use them as levers to manipulate you. Carl Jung helps us understand why this happens. He said the shadow is a living part of the personality. As long as you do not integrate your shadow, it governs you from the unconscious. And do you know what? One of the biggest shadows we carry is the idea that we need to be loved by everyone, that we need to be seen as correct, fair, kind, polite people. And behind that there is a deep fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone. Toxic people can smell this fear like sharks smell blood. They know that just threatening to withdraw affection, respect, or approval is enough to keep you trapped in their game. Sometimes they don't say anything directly, they just change their tone of voice. Look away, fall silent, create that tense atmosphere in the air. And immediately you find yourself trying to fix the situation. Please apologize, over-explain, and just like that, they regain power over you. Internal boundaries mean knowing deep down that you do not need anyone's approval to exist. They mean having absolute clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will not tolerate. And most importantly, they mean knowing that you are willing to lose relationships, opportunities, or even the goodwill of others to remain true to yourself. This does not mean you need to live armed, distrustful, or isolated. On the contrary, when you have internal boundaries, you live with much more lightness, because there is no longer a constant fear of losing others' acceptance. You know that no matter what happens, you will be okay with yourself. And this energy of solidity becomes perceptible to everyone, including toxic people who simply lose interest because there are no more hooks for them to hang on to. Internal boundaries also prevent you from falling into others' emotional games. When someone tries to provoke, manipulate, or test your weak points, you can observe the game without getting emotionally involved. You notice the maneuver, but you do not feel obligated to react. You maintain your peace because you know that that person's opinion or mood does not define who you are. But here is a hard truth. Developing internal boundaries requires courage. It requires facing the parts of yourself that still feel small, needy, desperate for acceptance. It requires sitting face to face with the fear of loneliness, the fear of judgment, the fear of being seen as selfish or cold. And only those willing to traverse this territory achieve real freedom. It is a process. No one wakes up overnight with unbreakable boundaries. But every time you choose to stay true to yourself, even if someone distances themselves or criticizes you, you reinforce those boundaries. And every time you do this, your energy changes. You begin to emit signals of psychic integrity. And as we mentioned before, toxic people feel this immediately and prefer to look for another target. But there is still a crucial point in this journey, perhaps the deepest and most transformative of all, because it is not enough to recognize your projections, stop feeding the drama, or build internal boundaries. You need to have the courage to face the darkest part that resides within you. Because as long as you continue to reject your own darkness, someone will always be able to use it against you. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Now we enter the darkest and paradoxically the most liberating territory of this entire journey, accepting your own darkness. Because up to this point, we have talked about projections, about stopping reactions, about internal boundaries. All of this is essential, but there is something that lies at the root of all vulnerability that attracts toxic people: the refusal to accept the darkest parts of our own soul. Carl Jung said, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." And this is more than just a beautiful phrase. It is a powerful statement, because everything you hide, everything you pretend doesn't exist. Everything you find ugly, shameful, or unacceptable in yourself becomes a weapon that can and will be used against you. Let's be honest, we all have dark thoughts, We all feel envy, resentment, wounded pride. We have all felt the urge to hurt, manipulate, lie, or take revenge. But most of us bury these parts deep down, convinced that if no one knows, then they don't exist. But they do, and they remain alive, pulsating in the underground of the psyche, seeking ways to manifest. The problem is that the more you hide your shadow, the more it grows in the dark. And worse, the more vulnerable you become to those who can see your weaknesses. Toxic people have a radar for sensing where you are afraid. If you are someone who does everything to always appear good, always correct, always perfect, they will instinctively poke at the wounds that remind you that you are not so perfect after all. And then you lose control, react, try to prove otherwise, and fall back into the drama cycle. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming a cruel, cold, or selfish person. It means recognizing that all these facets exist within you and learning to relate to them consciously. It means knowing that yes, you can feel anger, but you don't have to act on it. That yes, you can have dark thoughts, but that does not define who you are. It is when you accept that you have the capacity to be cruel, that you become genuinely compassionate, because you choose to be so. It is when you recognize your own envy that you stop allowing it to corrode you. It is when you admit that there is a part of you that would like to have power or control, that you stop falling into the game of those who try to dominate you. This process is not simple. It often hurts because it means tearing down the masks you have built over the years to be accepted, loved, admired. It means looking at impulses that you may judge as horrible. But Jung knew that the greatest danger is not in the shadow itself. It is in ignoring it. Because everything that remains unconscious drives your life, and you start to call it destiny. When you integrate your shadow, something extraordinary happens. You feel lighter. You stop fearing the judgment of others, because nothing anyone says about you can deeply affect you. You already know your own demons. And this creates a psychic freedom that toxic people simply cannot stand. They feed on your fear, your shame, your need to hide who you are. When they realize that you have nothing left to hide, they completely lose interest. Carl Jung left us an extraordinary legacy. He understood something that modern psychology is still trying to assimilate today. You cannot control the toxic people around you. You cannot prevent them from existing, nor can you stop the world from having people who feed on chaos, manipulation, or the pain of others. But there is something you can do, and it is infinitely more powerful. You can become someone that these people instinctively avoid. When you integrate your shadow, when you stop projecting your unhealed wounds, when you develop internal boundaries and learn not to feed the drama, you begin to emit a completely different energy. It's as if you become psychologically invisible to those who are hunting for weaknesses. You start to exist on another level of reality, where there are no emotional cracks for toxic people to enter. They realize that they have nowhere to hold on to, no way to provoke you, no way to manipulate you, and they simply walk away. But the transformation doesn't stop there. Integrating the shadow is not just about repelling toxic people. It is about freeing yourself to live authentically. It is discovering that you do not need anyone's validation to exist. It is feeling an inner peace that does not depend on who praises you or who criticizes you. It is living without fear of your own dark side because you know it exists. But you also know that you do not have to be governed by it. People who integrate their shadow become magnetic to other healthy, balanced, and mature individuals. Your relationships change. Your professional environment changes. Your energy changes. You stop feeling drained after social interactions. You stop feeling exhausted from trying to maintain masks or control how others perceive you. And you start attracting people who resonate on the same frequency of truth, respect, and depth. Jung said, "That which you resist persists. As long as you fight against your own darkness, it will continue to find ways to manifest and to attract people who will force you to see it. But the moment you decide to integrate that part of yourself, your whole life begins to reorganize. You free yourself from fear. You free yourself from guilt. and you start to experience something that few know, the feeling of being whole. If this video resonated with something deep inside you, if at any point you found yourself thinking, "This is exactly what I've been needing," then I want to offer you a personal invitation. Take a moment to reflect. What part of the video impacted you the most? What insight, sentence, or image lingered in your mind or stirred something in your body? Whatever it was, I invite you to write it in the comments below. It might seem like a simple thing, but in reality, it's one of the most important steps in inner work. Putting your thoughts and feelings into words is an act of integration. It's how we begin to bring the unconscious into consciousness. Carl Jung taught that healing begins the moment we become aware of what was previously hidden, when we can give voice to the parts of ourselves that have long remained silent or ignored. So, write it down, give it form, let it exist outside of your mind, and you'll start to feel the shift. Your comment might be the very reflection someone else needs to read today. We often think we're the only ones going through something, but healing becomes deeper and more human when we share the truth of our experience. And if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, I warmly encourage you to do so now. This space is here to support your journey, not just in understanding toxic dynamics or protecting your energy, but in transforming the very way you see yourself. What you've just watched is not an isolated moment. It's part of a larger, unfolding journey, a path back to your center, your clarity, and your strength. The next video continues that process. It will build on what you've already started to awaken today. So stay with it. Stay curious. Stay open. The fact that you're still here, listening, means something in you is ready to shift. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, be gentle with yourself. Guard your energy and honor what's surfacing within you. This is how change begins. Quietly, honestly, and powerfully.